Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great, so I just checked, I can't do presenter mode because it removes some of the graphics off my presentation for some reason. So I'm just going to proceed like this if that's okay with everyone. So welcome to my presentation on how we can enable collaboration between distributed systems used on an AEC project via linked data technologies. So to start with, I'd like to thank everyone for the invitation and opportunity to actually come and present to you here today. It's really exciting to be part of this community. You know, we've been thinking a lot about linked data and concepts around sharing information within our systems internally within BIM Launcher. So it's really, yeah, it's great to be involved with a like-minded community and someone that can understand and share our views on some of the challenges that we face with sharing information in the industry today. So my name is John Egan. I am CEO of BIM Launcher. BIM Launcher is a startup located in the west of Ireland. We're currently 4 developers. We are working on, well, our mission is to advance industry productivity by connecting the distributed or disconnected set of platforms and the data within those for construction projects. And how we do that and how we achieve that today is through our integrations hub for AEC platforms. So I appreciate I'm in a room of experts here. I wanted to just clarify my understanding of linked data. Linked data to me is essentially objects and their relationships. And linked data, when I refer to linked data, I refer to the enabling technologies that actually, I suppose, that have been developed on top of this concept of objects and their relationships. So what I'm going to talk about here today is I'm going to start with today and the collaboration patterns within those, and then I'm going to move on to how I feel that linked data technologies can enable the next level of collaboration on a BIM project, and how I feel that a unified ecosystem on top of a linked data technologies can be the means to achieve this. So to start with, I just thought I'd set the scene with the context for information and the different types of information exchange on a construction project or on a project today. So typically you have many systems used by many stakeholders across different stages of the project delivery life cycle. Starting with the top here, you can see the client information storage system, and then moving down into the tier 1 supply chain, and having features of platforms, or sorry, different stakeholders using different platforms because they add features to their workflows that no other system does. Meaning that there is often many applications and platforms used on a single project, and as you move down through the supply chain, you tend to have more applications, and ultimately what this results in is a pattern like we can see here on the right. So this image was taken from a report by Box called Mapping the Information Economy. And what we can see here is the different clusters and those red lines or red curves connecting those clusters, which indicates the flow of information between clusters. So what kind of information are they sharing? They're sharing everything from documents to drawings to RFIs, change orders, issues, and mail and correspondence on a project. And that's just to name a few. So one other interesting fact here is that the Box report actually exposed that in the construction industry, these clusters or organizations actually share information out of the boundary of their own organization twice as often as any other industry surveyed, which included banking, IT, entertainment, etc., and two others that slipped my mind. So the exchange of information between these collaborators is actually extremely inefficient. We currently, or the industry currently uses exchange mechanisms, email, extranets, or they refer to, or they use external file sharing systems like Box and other file drop services. Some even resort to paper. So some of the downfalls and negatives that actually, or I suppose headaches for industry as a result of the systems not talking efficiently with one another, is that it's a very costly process to exchange information, because it takes many stakeholders' brain power, if you like, to actually carry out the exchange. So with the issuing and the accepting. You also have a lot of investment in security protocols around sensitive data and security concerns around that. So the governance of information being shared. There's a huge aspect of project risk, or a huge increase in project risk with regards to information being shared between systems, such as versions of documents being lost, you know, versions being corrupted, missing, you know, missing metadata on files, and obviously you have that risk of human error, where the human was maybe at a party on the weekend and it's Monday morning and he misses out a version, which then can have a big knock on in terms of the legal risk for the project, as you may not necessarily be able to understand the provenance of a piece of information, as you know, it has been exchanged between multiple different systems, and maybe some of the systems are taken offline before it actually reaches litigation. So there's also a lot of waste. Data created on files in one system, it's not managed and transferred to the next system because the other system doesn't support the same metadata, and there's different semantic meaning metadata. And ultimately what it really boils down to is a lot of rework and users actually trying to recreate from piecemeal piece of information that they have to hand. Fortunately, over the last 10 to 15 years, you have, or there's been an increase in, I suppose, or a reduction in the chaos for exchanging this information between systems. And this has been embodied in ISO 19650. So the predecessor to that was the BS 1192, which came out in 2007. And what has happened is the industry has been collaborating around one set of guidelines for good information management on a project. And so we've a lot of investment made into this ISO 19650. ISO 19650 Part 2 defines the common data environment. And this is how all of the systems that are used by collaborators on a project could and should be used together on a project. So the best principles and best guidelines for making that happen. But the issue here is that it's very high level and it's a blueprint. Well, it's very high level and it's based on the lowest common denominator of the systems that they're connecting. Actually preparing to connect dumb extranets like, you know, like file systems that are held on local or shared drives, maybe SharePoint, Dropbox, etc. So they're not being definitive about the way that like information is actually managed on the within these systems, but it's a really high level overview on what systems should do if they're involved in this ISO 19650 process. For me, as a systems engineer, a systems architect, I look at this and I see that it's a blueprint. It essentially defines the user requirements and features that a system should provide for when connecting and using multiple systems on a project. Which brings me on to my next point. How do we actually enable this a distributed CDE? So how can we bring the standard as it is today into what it needs to be to support multiple systems being used concurrently on a project? And I feel that there's a requirement for a new protocol here, which is ultimately to provide for this distributed actually manually managing today and is causing us huge pain. And I think that linked data technologies is our means to deliver on that. So with that in mind, I've drilled into ISO 19650 and I've picked out 3 main points that I feel need to be extended to support this distributed technology stack that would form the basis for the protocol. So to start with, it talks about the integrations. The standard talks about or advises that before the project commences, all systems should be tested to ensure that they're compatible with one another. And this means that this means that test systems to ensure that no metadata is lost as they're exchanged between these systems. And to my mind, this means try and achieve that unified platform so that all the components can work together as if they were one. But the problem is that information cannot be shared between systems in an automated way. So what this means is that we need to come up with a solution and not one that creates point-to-point CDE work or the CDE workflow, but we need to actually create a centralized common object model so we can map the different systems via the connectors to this hub. And this hub would essentially house the ontology or the project ontology, which creates this almost single definition where we can map all the entities within the different systems to that. The next point that I think is very good about the ISO 19650 is the workflows. The workflows is this robust process for collaborative design development or information development, where each stakeholder can actually develop information or project information in a work in progress area. When that's ready to be published, they publish the shared area, which can be accessed by other shareholders. And beyond that, they can push it to the published area where it can be used by client or anyone. That's its final state. But the problem is that in systems, whether they're dumb or smart, whether they're being used on a single project, they currently have their own workflow engines at play. So they're all trying to implement this CDE workflow, which creates a lot of overlap. To my mind, what needs to happen is the workflow engines need to be abstracted into a centralized information management module that can enforce the project information exchange policies in compatible systems. So what I'm thinking about here is that the subscribed systems that are talking to this centralized information management module would have a master-slave relationship. The centralized information management module would manage all of the information exchange within the subscribing systems, and they would have to pretty much drop their own internal workflow systems, or we come up with a way to map their internal workflow systems to this information management module. The next point, or the third and final abstraction that I think is important to talk about in the context of the ISO 19650 is the information containers. So the information containers, the intention of the ISO 19650 standard is that the information containers represent the smallest piece of interesting information for any of the stakeholders working on the project. And this is the, I suppose, the smallest piece of, or this is what's shared amongst this system or the CD system. But the problem that I see with the information containers today is that it uses a file naming convention to describe what's in the information container, which doesn't give us or the systems that are participating in the CD the best opportunity to understand what's in the CD without actually having to go ahead and parse the file, understand it, and do something, take action on it. So I feel that we're leaving a lot on the table there. The solution to this would be that there would be a classification library in which every project can choose from. And this classification library would describe the information container types. So for instance, let's say we have an information container type drawing. We might have some sort of a tagging system in which says drawing 2D, and then maybe we can share that, or we would have the information container would have a lightweight representation of the information that's in that information container. And what it would enable is that we would be able to exchange these lightweight objects around this system without the actual content, which could be maybe 50 megabytes up to a couple of gigs in size. So it might alleviate and mean that we could actually, rather than copying the information around systems, we could have some sort of a torrent protocol where we are actually able to only fetch information from systems on demand and when we require it. So what I'm trying to do here is actually, decouple all of these components from the actual CDE and what ISO 19650 describes, and then develop those in their channels so that they support this distributed workflow. What I'd like to see and what I think could potentially happen here is that we could actually have a technology ecosystem to support the distributed common data environment. So we would have a common API that is made up of all these components, and perhaps we could see a lot more value generated around this via third-party developers and organizations that are actually using this at the core to enable the distributed workflows that are currently causing such a headache for us. So the challenges that I see here in actually developing this technology stack and this API is that the technology maturity or the linked data technology maturity isn't as mature as other technologies. So what I mean by that is there are a lot of the linked data technologies, i.e. these graph databases, are actually in product stage of their life cycle. So for instance, you would have a lot more availability of different kinds of data stores and a lot more tooling around those available in the ecosystem today. Also, from a development perspective, the accessibility to of linked data and I suppose graph database technologies and the skill sets of developers are not as advanced as, let's say, NoSQL and SQL databases would be within the market. So the next challenge is that market leaders need to buy into this. So Autodesks, Bentleys, Trimbles, Aconex need to buy in. They need to understand and see that their companies can too get value from the fact that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And then finally, the stakeholder adoptability. We've actually seen that BIM and digital projects and the procurement of digital projects over the last 15 years has been a very gradual increase. This is going to, the distributed common data environment will perhaps extend and alleviate most of the problems for exchanging information between systems, but it will also add another 5 to 10 years on the development of BIM. And I suppose, yeah, so pretty much what I'm saying there is that it's a marathon, that the finish line where we thought it would be is now pushed out another 5-10 years, I expect. So who is working on this? We are. BIM Launcher, everything that I've presented here is things that we think about every day within our organization. We connect different providers like PlanGrid, Procore, Aconex, BIM 360 and SharePoint. We are really interested, or we appreciate that we're new to this community. We're really open, and we appreciate that this innovation can't happen within our silo alone. So I'd really like to ask if anyone wants to collaborate or develop any of these ideas with us, please approach me either after this or in the future. Another organization that's working on this is the Building Smart Open CDE API working group. This is also something that we're heavily involved in. And this is pretty much not just us, but other vendors like Aconex, Trimble, A-Site have just joined, and a couple of small, so it's a growing group that is actually working on the very challenges that I've discussed here today. And obviously, I've already said that we're new to this community, so you guys may know of someone else that's working on these problems, and I'd love if you could share those with us, because once again, we'd love to collaborate. So with that, thanks for listening. There are my contact details, and yeah, I'd really love to chat about some of these topics and hear your thoughts and opinions on how this might progress to something more than this presentation. So thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you, John, for this interesting presentation. I don't know if we have some questions for John. Feel free to ask them. Might also be that we have some of these collaborators that you're looking for. That would be great if we could bring together these interests through this community.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just you talked about some of the challenges with some of these market leaders that we have today. I think we see an industry that's, at least for the building sector, very centralized around some big software vendors. And I think the strategy of these vendors is pretty much to have their own common data environments, but to kind of get people into that infrastructure. How do you see, like, what would the incentive be for moving into something more open, you think?
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with you. I think that CDE vendors are traditionally have been very closed. They've been focused on their partnerships, and they didn't really have an ecosystem play. And they didn't see well, I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that we're actually starting to see, like Procore, for instance, and BIM 360, putting a lot of resources into their platforms and ensuring that their platforms are more connected than any others. And what I'm seeing is other vendors that we've been working with, those guys are just saying, oh crap, we've nearly missed the boat here. Autodesk have, I think, something like 83, I think in the region of probably about 100 connectors within their BIM 360 ecosystem. Procore have almost double that. And then you have the smaller guys, well, not smaller guys, but the bigger guys like Aconex, let's say, for instance, who have a non-existent app store. You know, they don't have the, I suppose, they haven't really thought about Aconex as a platform, it seems. And well, there's certainly, you know, that could be, well, you could almost infer that from their lack of connections. But I think A-Site's play now, or not A-Site, sorry, Aconex's play is to focus on this open CDE API and really try to get the benefits that an open standard around connecting platforms can bring. So yeah, I think you kind of have two extremes there. You have the platform who has been playing the platform play for quite some time, and then you have the new guys that are coming to the table and seeing that they've nearly missed the boat, and they're trying to push open standards so that they can once again get the benefits on connecting their platform to others.
Yeah, that's I think the only way you can get like a bite of the cake. Like it needs to be open for. And
well,
I think you never see one solution that can take it all in and cover all areas. So it needs to be open towards on the outside.
Like, and it's becoming a big decision maker for customers of Aconex, customers of PlanGrid, and like we are so used to integrated systems outside of construction. Like for instance, in our software development workflows, like if a tool doesn't integrate with that, we don't consider it, you know. And even customers that I'm talking about that would be talking to that would be using the BIM launcher system to exchange information between these systems and CDEs, they say, yes, like it's a big decision maker, is that we do not have to you know, manually transfer this information, increase our project risk, and ultimately, you know, if we don't have those connections and those integrations, will, you know, it's a tick box for the competitor that does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you definitely opened some big discussions there that I hope people will continue in the Slack channel.